I once believed family meant safety, that marriage was a doorway into warmth. But safety is a fragile illusion when betrayal hides in plain sight. I designed a lamp, my signature etched into its glass, my gift to my sister-in-law, a symbol of trust. A week later, it appeared online under someone else's name, priced like a trinket. No one admitted it, no one cared. They smiled at me across Sunday dinner while cash flowed quietly behind their backs. I said nothing. Silence can be a weapon. And years later, that weapon had built an empire of glass they couldn't escape. When I first walked through the heavy oak doors of the Hart family estate, I thought I had stepped into a new life. The house was alive with warm light and the scent of cinnamon rolls. Laughter rolled through the wide kitchen, spilling into the garden where fairy lights glowed above a long wooden table. Nate, my husband, had his hand at the small of my back, and his smile told me I was safe. For the first time in years, I felt like I belonged to something bigger than myself. Sabrina, his younger sister, floated across the lawn with the kind of careless charm only the truly adored possess. She kissed my cheek, her perfume sweet and slightly intoxicating. "Evelyn, you're glowing," she said, tilting her head like I was a painting she wanted to memorize. I blushed, foolishly warmed by her approval. When the time came for gifts, I carried out a box wrapped in ivory paper. Inside rested the lamp I had designed, its glass curved in a perfect ellipse, a single silver seam etched with my initials so faint you'd miss them unless you leaned close. Sabrina gasped, clasped her hands, and pulled me into a quick embrace. The lamp was placed by the entryway, casting a delicate ripple of light over the wall. For me, it wasn't just a present, it was trust, crystallized. A week later, Nate and I returned for Sunday dinner. The house smelled of roast chicken, chatter spilling from the dining room. I walked in expecting to see my lamp glowing by the door. Instead, I froze. A different lamp sat there, mass-produced, cheap, its surface so glossy, it reflected the overhead bulbs like greasy coins. "Oh, I just wanted a change," Sabrina chirped, sweeping past me with a tray of glasses. My smile cracked. In the middle of dinner, as Nate and his father debated grout colors for the bathroom remodel, I distracted myself with my phone. A notification popped up from an online resale app I used to monitor design trends. Ellipsa glass lamp, custom etched. My thumb trembled as I opened it. The photograph was grainy, but the seam of light cut across the glass exactly as I had carved it. That crooked line, my midnight slip, stared back at me like a scar. I locked the phone quickly, but inside something had already shattered. The world didn't stop. The Hart family laughed, clinked glasses, passed bread around. Only I sat there with a weight pressing on my chest. People think betrayal comes like thunder, loud and violent, but sometimes it's silent, disguised as domestic chatter. Later that night, I pulled the covers to my chin, pretending to drift into sleep beside Nate. My phone screen glowed faintly as I checked the resale app again. The listing was gone. But my bank account had pinged with a deposit, exactly the asking price of the lamp. I stared at the numbers, the zeros marching across the screen. Someone had sold my gift, and the profit had found its way into our shared account. Nate must have known. I closed my eyes, letting the bitterness coat my throat. A confrontation would mean a scene. Sabrina's tears, my mother-in-law's cold stare, Nate's helpless shrug. No one would take my side. They would call me dramatic, ungrateful, impossible. So I did nothing, or at least, that's what it looked like. In reality, I was filing away screenshots, recording the little betrayals, tucking evidence into folders named after colors on my design palette: ivory, smoke, ash, crimson. Scrolling late one night, I found it again. Sabrina's best friend had posted a story, a photo in a boutique downtown, captioned with heart emojis. Behind her reflection in a tall mirror, I saw it, the same elliptical lamp, my lamp, glowing in a sterile white showroom. That crooked seam was still there, defiant, unaltered. My chest tightened, but my mind sharpened. It wasn't just a careless swap. It was a pattern, a game. I pressed the image, zoomed in, and saved it. The mirror in the picture showed Sabrina's arm around her friend, their smiles wide, champagne glasses raised. To anyone else, it was harmless. But I saw the quiet confession. They were in this together. I turned off the phone and walked to my drafting table. My hands itched for pencil and paper. I drew a doorway, wide, open, but lined with glass that shimmered like armor. I shaded the edges, thickened the frame, left no corner unguarded. When I finished, I wrote a sentence in the margin, pressing each letter into the paper as if carving into stone. Design is the truth you can't return. And that night I understood. Silence wasn't weakness, it was time. Time I would use to build something they couldn't sell, couldn't diminish, couldn't replace. The next morning, over coffee, Nate scrolled his phone. "Good news," he said casually, sliding it away. "Got a bonus from work, just a little surprise." I looked at him, searching his face for a crack, a flicker of guilt. Nothing. His smile was too smooth, too practiced. I sipped my coffee, nodded, and said nothing. Weeks later, the email arrived. Subject line: an opportunity. It was from Marcus Hale, my old mentor, now leading a consortium of investors eager to launch a new kind of store. "We need someone who understands how to design for trust," he wrote, "someone who believes objects should carry their own truth." My heart pounded as I read. He wanted me. He wanted my vision. And then came the final sting. The RSVP list for our grand opening landed in my inbox. The first confirmed guest printed at the top, Sabrina Hart. The following Sunday, I returned to the Hart House, smiling as though nothing had shifted beneath the surface. Roast beef perfumed the air. Voices overlapped in cheerful waves, and Sabrina leaned over her phone, laughing at something her friend had sent her. To them, I was still the pliant new wife, grateful to sit at their table. I placed my napkin on my lap, offered to refill glasses, nodded when spoken to. If they looked closely, they might have noticed my hands steady, too steady, as though I had chosen a role and meant to play it perfectly. I let them think I was harmless. I let them think I had forgiven the missing lamp. When Nate's mother raised her eyebrows at me across the table, silently assessing, I lowered my eyes and smiled. Meanwhile, my phone, buried in my handbag beside me, quietly recorded the conversation. Each phrase, each careless laugh became part of a growing archive. I saved screenshots of money transfers, preserved every text Sabrina sent Nate about helping Mom out again. My folders of evidence were multiplying. Smoke, ash, crimson. I knew exactly what I was doing. One evening, I slipped into the hallway to retrieve my coat. Sabrina's voice carried from the den, high and gleeful. "She's working on some new drawings," she told her friend over speakerphone. "I'm going to sell those, too. Who cares? She'll never say a word." My chest tightened, but I held my breath, silently pressing record. Her laughter rang like broken glass. That was all I needed, proof not of one betrayal, but a pattern. When I returned to the dining room, Sabrina looked up, lips pink from wine. "Everything okay?" she asked, feigning innocence. I smiled at her, steady. "Perfect," I said, sitting back down. Inside, my silence was sharpening into a blade. 2 weeks later, the message arrived. It was from Marcus Hale, the mentor who had once taken a chance on me when I was a junior designer. His email was concise but heavy with promise. "We are launching something new, a store where authenticity can't be faked, a place where design itself protects the truth. Will you lead it?" I read it 3 times before answering. The idea lit a fuse inside me. Phoenix Protocol store, every item tagged, every origin traceable. No more whispered lies about where things came from, no more shadows to hide in. My pulse raced at the thought of Sabrina's face, bathed in the sterile boutique lights across the street, as she realized her game was over before it began. I met Marcus at a small cafe downtown. His hair had thinned, his voice gravelly with age, but his eyes still burned with conviction. "People deserve to know what they're buying," he said, stirring his coffee absently. "The system cheats both creators and consumers. We're going to rewrite it." "I want in," I replied. My voice didn't tremble. He smiled, as though he had expected nothing less. That night, I began my list of allies. A glass artisan I'd once mentored who still owed me a favor, a lawyer specializing in intellectual property, even Mrs. Keene, the art teacher from Sabrina's high school, who had confessed once, teary-eyed, that Nate's mother had conned her out of a family heirloom years ago. All of them agreed to help. My silence had gathered power, and now it was beginning to speak. Still, I felt the sting of isolation. At night, I would stand before the mirror in my studio, sketching until my wrists ached, the reflection staring back at me like an accomplice. "Have you ever kept a secret plan so close it became your heartbeat?" I whispered once, as if asking myself. My eyes in the glass looked older, sharper, no longer naive. The first draft of the Phoenix floor plan grew under my hands. Walls of transparent glass, shelving that displayed not only objects, but their histories, QR codes engraved like fingerprints, impossible to erase. It wasn't just a store. It was a fortress of memory. I leaned back, rubbed my ink-stained fingers together, and smiled. "Design doesn't just remember, it exposes," I murmured, tasting the words. They felt like iron, unbreakable. The next day, Marcus called with the location. "You'll love this," he said, voice crackling through the line. "We secured a property in the heart of downtown. High visibility. It's directly across from that boutique your sister-in-law seems to adore." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I pictured Sabrina standing in her boutique's window, raising a glass to another stolen triumph. I pictured her eyes widening when she looked up and saw across the street. A gleaming new space, transparent walls glowing, every product carrying its truth. My truth. "Perfect," I told Marcus. My smile this time wasn't for show. Confidence grew inside me like a flame as construction on Phoenix Protocol began. I walked the empty floor of the future store, heels clicking against polished concrete, imagining the glass shelves lit with truth. For the first time in months, I felt ahead of the game. Yet confidence has a way of blinding you to shadows. The shadow, as it turned out, lived closer than I ever wanted to admit. It began with an overheard conversation. I had returned to the Hart House, armed with practiced politeness. Laughter bubbled in the kitchen, pots simmered, and my mother-in-law's voice floated through the hall. "Keep her calm," she told Sabrina, her tone low but sharp. "As long as she doesn't suspect, we can keep moving the pieces." My breath caught, and I leaned closer to the doorframe. Sabrina's laugh answered, higher pitched than usual. "She never says anything, Mom. She's too busy pretending to be perfect." The words sank like ice. All along, I had thought Sabrina the mastermind, petty, reckless, greedy, but it was her mother who held the reins. The woman who kissed my cheek after dinner, who pressed leftovers into my hands, who insisted I call her Mom, was the one pulling every string. That night, I confronted Nate quietly in the privacy of our kitchen. "Did you know?" I asked, my voice steady, too steady. He shifted in his chair, eyes dropping to the grain of the table. "She needed help," he whispered. "She had debts. I signed a note for her. It's not what you think." I stared at him, my husband, the man I had trusted above all. "You knew she was selling our things?" He flinched. Silence filled the room. It was louder than a scream. That silence was his answer. My chest tightened with betrayal. I realized I had not one enemy, but a house full of them, and the man beside me had chosen to stay silent, letting me bleed alone. I began to replay the past with new eyes. Memory reshuffled like cards dealt by a cruel hand. The missing earrings after Christmas dinner. Sabrina had blamed the cleaning staff. The swapped painting in the hallway. Oh, we just redecorated. The bottle of wine at our wedding, the one that had shattered at our feet during the toast. My mother-in-law had called it bad luck. Now it all aligned. Every missing item, every unexplained debt, every convenient excuse, each thread wove into a single tapestry of deception. And at its center was the boutique, gleaming like a shrine to dishonesty. They hadn't just betrayed me. They had been running a family economy built on theft and resale, masked by smiles and Sunday dinners. One evening, I caught my reflection in the studio mirror as I sketched another floor plan. The glass had cracked along one corner days earlier, a spiderweb fracture spreading across my face. For a moment, it felt like prophecy. My image split, fractured, as though reminding me, nothing is whole. I touched the glass, felt the jagged line, and whispered, "So this is what I've become. An object broken to reveal the truth inside." The weight of it pressed down. "Have you ever realized," I thought, staring into that splintered reflection, "that you've been a pawn in someone else's game all along?" Still, I sketched, because design, unlike people, didn't lie. It recorded every intention, every cut, every etched line. The hammer fell when a news article exploded across the city's feeds. Luxury resale boutique tied to counterfeit network, local family implicated. I scrolled through the paragraphs, heart pounding, eyes devouring every word. There it was. Sabrina Hart, listed as an intermediary. Margaret Hart, my mother-in-law, named as a silent investor. Even Nate's name, buried in the fine print, tied to loan documents and financial transfers. Photographs accompanied the article, images of pre-loved goods displayed like trophies in the boutique's windows. And in the corner of one photo glowed the unmistakable ellipse of my lamp, seam crooked, line defiant. The proof I had carried silently was now laid bare for the city to see. I leaned back, trembling. The world had judged them, even if I hadn't spoken a word. My phone buzzed with messages, colleagues forwarding the link, journalists asking for comment, Marcus sending only one line. "This is bigger than we thought." I closed my eyes, letting the chaos crash over me. My design had always remembered, and now, so did the world. Design keeps receipts. It will judge us all. I whispered into the empty studio, my words echoing like a verdict. But even in that moment of vindication, a deeper fear stirred. Because when you strip away illusions, when you expose every secret, the game doesn't end. It simply changes. The scandal should have destroyed me too. For a week, headlines screamed my name alongside theirs. Designer's family caught in counterfeit scandal. Strangers debated me online. Strangers who had never touched my work, never sat in that kitchen where betrayal was served alongside Sunday roast. I felt stripped bare, my private wounds displayed on billboards. At night, I lay in my studio, staring at the fractured mirror, the crack splitting my reflection in two. One side of me was the humiliated wife. The other side, the one sharpening her silence into steel, was almost ready to emerge. When Marcus called, his voice was calm, steady, the anchor I hadn't realized I needed. "Evelyn, this is our moment. The city is watching. We can either let them bury you in gossip, or we can show them what you've built." I looked at the sprawling blueprints across my desk. Every line told the story of a place where nothing could be stolen, nothing could be faked, where artisans' work was protected by an invisible shield of code. The Phoenix Protocol store was never just a business. It was the culmination of every bruise I had endured in silence, every etched seam of pain. On opening day, the air itself seemed to hold its breath. The glass walls shimmered like water, each display piece glowing under subtle light, each object carrying its immutable digital fingerprint. Customers scanned with their phones and watched histories unfold, names of makers, dates of creation, materials verified on-chain. There was no place for shadows here. Then the press swarmed, cameras flashed, microphones were raised, and a woman with a sharp bob asked, "Mrs. Hart, is it true your husband's family was involved in counterfeit dealings?" I felt the world tilt. This was the edge of the cliff I had been building toward. I had to choose. stay silent and protect a crumbling family name, or speak and sever myself from it forever. I stepped forward, breath steady, and looked straight into the cameras. Design doesn't lie, I said. Every object has a story. Some people tried to erase mine. Today you can see the truth for yourself. The room erupted. Reporters shouted, pens scratched. My chest shook, not with fear, but with release. For the first time, I wasn't hiding. I was speaking in the only language I trusted: light, glass, design. Would you have done it? Would you have pulled the curtain back, knowing the people you married into would be crushed under the weight of the truth? The collapse came swiftly. Within a week, the boutique across the street stood empty, its windows papered over. The investigation widened, tracing every counterfeit back to a single name, whispered in hushed tones: Victor Calder, a European businessman known for funding underground markets. The revelation landed like thunder. He wasn't just Sabrina's friend's supplier. He was the silent owner behind half the city's counterfeit trade. And my mother-in-law, so dignified in her pearls, had signed documents tying her fortune to his. The dominoes fell one by one. Customers who once flocked to Sabrina's boutique now crossed the street to scan the glowing shelves of Phoenix. What they found there was not just authenticity, but redemption. Each item told a story of the hands that crafted it. The glassblower who signed with fire, the weaver who stitched her initials into the digital code. They came not only to buy, but to witness, to believe. In her cell, Sabrina asked for a mirror. The guard obliged. She stared at her reflection, at the bruises blooming along her jaw from a scuffle during her arrest. She touched her cheek and saw not the beloved sister, not the golden girl, but a stranger with hollow eyes. The glass did not flatter her. It told the truth. In my own store, I installed the final piece. The remnants of my stolen lamp, melted and reshaped into the cashier's counter. Its crooked seam, once a symbol of betrayal, now stretched into a radiant pattern, a scar transformed into light. Customers ran their fingers along it without knowing its history. I did not stop them. Reporters swarmed daily, praising the vision, the courage, the innovation. Yet I knew the protocol was not about me. It was about every artisan who had been robbed, every promise broken in the name of money. I was only the architect. The system itself belonged to everyone. Design doesn't forgive, but it can free, I whispered, standing before the glass wall. And I felt it then. The first breath of freedom, rising like heat from ashes. The night of the grand launch arrived. Music pulsed through the glass, champagne flutes glittered, and the street outside filled with curious eyes. I wore a black dress, simple, severe, as if to remind myself I had already buried one life. The crowd parted suddenly. A hush fell. A man in a tailored suit walked in, his presence heavy as iron. Salt and pepper hair, watch gleaming under the lights, smile as sharp as a blade. Cameras turned toward him instinctively, as though they sensed his gravity. Victor Calder. He extended his hand to me, palm steady, eyes glittering with amusement. "Congratulations, Miss Hart," he said smoothly. "You've built something extraordinary. Now, why don't we discuss how we might build together?" The glass counter behind me glimmered, the etched seam catching the light like a wound refusing to heal. For a heartbeat, I stood between the past and the future, between the outstretched hand of the man who had orchestrated my family's ruin and the store that embodied my defiance. And in that suspended moment, every camera waited. The week after the launch, my name became a headline, a hashtag, a cautionary tale, a battle cry. Phoenix Protocol Saves Local Artisans read one banner, while another snarled, "Ungrateful wife destroys her husband's family." Every morning I woke to a flood of notifications. Praise, threats, invitations, condemnations. Strangers I would never meet dissected my marriage in comment sections, deciding if I was hero or villain. The store thrived. lines wrapped around the block, customers holding their phones up like torches to scan the glowing tags. Each time a screen confirmed authenticity, I felt the same shiver. Proof that truth could shine brighter than any chandelier. Yet beneath the applause, a hollowness spread. Victory, I learned, could be poisonous. One evening, I walked alone through the store. The recycled glass counter shimmered under soft lights, the crooked seam from the old lamp glinting like a scar. I should have felt triumphant, but instead, I felt watched. Outside, a group lingered, holding signs. Traitor. Gold digger. Family destroyer. Their voices seeped through the glass, chanting, accusing. I pressed my hand against the counter as if the etched scar could anchor me. Have you ever achieved everything you dreamed of, only to realize the world might never forgive the way you achieved it? That night, I returned to the store to find the glass wall scratched, deep grooves slashed through the transparent panels I had painstakingly designed from fragments of betrayal. The vandals had left a single word scrawled in black paint across the entrance: snitch. My breath caught in my throat. The light still glowed, but for the first time, it seemed fragile. The following morning, the city buzzed with new revelations. Another article appeared, this one written with surgical precision. Phoenix Protocol Exposé: Who Really Profits from the Truth. The piece hinted that my investors weren't saints. Buried within was a name that froze me: Victor Calder. I confronted Marcus, my mentor, in his office overlooking the city. "You knew," I said, voice sharp. He sighed, looking older than ever. "Evelyn, listen to me. Calder funds half the supply chain in this city. If he hadn't invested, Phoenix would never have left the drawing board. You wanted power. This is the price." The realization struck like another shatter of glass. The man who had engineered Sabrina's descent, who had whispered into my mother-in-law's ear, was also the one who held my new empire in his palm. My victory was built on his money. Panic clawed at my chest. If Calder fell, would Phoenix fall too? Was I just another pawn, painted gold to distract the crowd while the real machine hummed beneath? That evening, I sat alone in my studio, the cracked mirror still leaning against the wall. My reflection stared back at me, but now the break split me into countless fragments, infinite copies of myself. In each shard, I saw a different Evelyn: the dutiful wife, the betrayed woman, the triumphant designer, the accidental conspirator. And in Sabrina's broken face on the news, I saw something else: a warning. She had been reckless, but she had also been desperate. My mother-in-law had used her as a shield, a disposable piece in Calder's game. The girl I once tried to befriend had been devoured by a system older and hungrier than either of us. And suddenly I wondered, had I truly beaten her, or had I simply stepped onto the board in her place? "Have you ever realized," I whispered, tracing the mirror's crack with my fingertip, "that the enemy you hate might only be another victim, caught in the same net?" The door creaked open. Calder stepped in. No cameras now, no crowd. Just him and me, the room shrinking around his presence. He didn't bother to sit. His smile was surgical, precise. "You've done well," he said. "Better than I expected. The city believes in you. Perfect. You'll be my new face." I clenched my fists, the ink from last night's sketches still staining my nails. "I don't work for liars." He laughed softly. "You already do. Every brick in that store was paid for by me. Every light that shines on your glass burns because I allow it. Do you want Phoenix to collapse like your marriage, or will you take my hand and secure your empire?" He extended his hand, steady, confident. The gesture mirrored Sabrina's smile that night she accepted my lamp, a counterfeit embrace hiding the blade beneath. "Design remembers," I whispered, the words tasting like iron and smoke. "But memory can kill." His smile sharpened, eyes narrowing as though he had heard a challenge he'd been waiting for. The room seemed to tilt again, the crack in the mirror widening. I stood between destruction and survival, between silence and war. His hand hovered there, patient, steady, and I had to decide if I would take it. The days after Calder's visit were the darkest I had ever known. His words echoed in my head like chains rattling against the walls of my chest. Every light that shines on your glass burns because I allow it. He wasn't wrong. Without his money, Phoenix might never have been built. For the first time since my wedding day, I felt small again, trapped in a game I hadn't designed. My victories tasted of ash. The city still praised me, but in my mind, I was just another pawn wearing a borrowed crown. I spent nights pacing my studio, sketching and tearing up sketches, hands blackened with graphite. The cracked mirror reflected back an endless hall of fractured Evelyns, each one accusing me. One shard showed the obedient wife I used to be. Another, the furious woman hiding evidence. Another, the architect who thought she could outsmart them all. And in the corner, I almost swore I saw Sabrina's bruised face staring back at me. My silence had saved me, but it had also condemned her. Was this victory or cruelty dressed as justice? The breaking point came when I opened the encrypted server that held every document, every screenshot, every transaction tied to Calder's network. My allies had been adding their own files, testimonies from artisans, contracts signed under duress, whispers of laundering routes across continents. It wasn't just the hearts. It was bigger, deeper, filthier. I realized I had one move left, the one I had been sketching in secret margins since the night the lamp was sold. The next morning, I stood before a wall of journalists and investors. The Phoenix store's glass walls shimmered behind me, alive with light. My hands trembled, but my voice did not. This system was never meant to be mine, I said. Phoenix Protocol belongs to everyone. From this moment, every line of code, every tool we built, it is open, free, unowned. No one, not even me, can control the truth. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Phones lifted higher, recording every word. Calder's face, visible at the edge of the cameras, stiffened. He had lost his leverage in a single sentence. My silence had built a weapon. My voice had detonated it. The press swarmed closer, shouting questions, but I stepped back, letting the light of Phoenix do the talking. Customers scanned objects, watched digital histories unfold, applauded as artisans' names filled their screens. Justice was no longer in my hands. It had been coded into the very walls. And then the second twist landed like a drumbeat. News broke that Sabrina had agreed to testify. She was being released temporarily as a state witness, her cooperation aimed squarely at Calder. My heart stuttered. Sabrina, who had once sold my trust for cash, was now the blade pointing at the man who had devoured us all. The crowd around me buzzed with the news. Inside, I held my breath. This wasn't just my fight anymore. It was a war I had started, but someone else would finish. Would you dare to cooperate with someone who once betrayed you to defeat a stronger enemy? The weeks that followed felt like watching a city molt. Calder's empire, once untouchable, began to collapse. With every artisan who uploaded proof of authenticity, another counterfeit outlet went dark. Consumers no longer bought stories whispered in boutiques. They demanded receipts written in glass and code. The Phoenix Protocol spread faster than I had dreamed, adopted by rival retailers, independent makers, even museums. What I had built to avenge myself had grown into a revolution. Nate came by the store one evening, standing awkwardly at the threshold. His eyes were rimmed red, voice hoarse. "I've started therapy," he confessed. "I should have defended you. I see that now." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his wedding band, placing it on the counter. "I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know I'm not hiding anymore." I nodded. No tears, no anger left to give. The past had already carved its line. Forgiveness wasn't mine to grant. It was his to earn elsewhere. Sabrina, too, sought me out after her release. She looked smaller, the glitter gone from her eyes. She stopped in front of the Phoenix counter, her fingers trembling as they brushed the glass. Beneath her hand glowed the faint seam of my old lamp, reborn into the heart of the store. She whispered, almost to herself, "It's still here." I stepped forward. The light caught my reflection in the polished surface. No cracks now, only clarity. For the first time, the mirror showed a woman whole, someone who had walked through betrayal, fire, and ash, and had not just survived, but transformed. "Design keeps receipts and writes new stories," I said softly. The phrase was no longer a weapon, but a vow. Sabrina lifted her eyes to mine, searching for anger, for rejection. Instead, she found only steadiness. I did not embrace her, but I did not turn her away either. I gestured toward the shelves glowing with truth. "If you want to start again," I said, "you know where to begin." So outside, the city lights shimmered against Phoenix's glass walls. Inside, people moved slowly, scanning, touching, marveling at objects that finally spoke their real stories. For once, no one was selling lies. And as I stood there, the hum of the glass surrounding me, I understood. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about rewriting the rules, about proving that beauty, once fractured, could be reassembled into something stronger than before. The crowd applauded, the cameras flashed, and Sabrina lingered by the lamp she had once betrayed. She pressed her palm to the glass, and the etched seam glowed against her skin like a pulse. She whispered, "Thank you for letting me try again." I didn't answer. I simply nodded, letting the silence speak for me. Because sometimes silence is not weakness. Sometimes it is legacy. The lights of Phoenix flared brighter, casting ripples across the street where Calder's boutique had once stood, now nothing more than an empty shell. The night felt endless, but for the first time I welcomed it. The game was over, or perhaps it had just begun.